Prime Minister Imran Khan. Both of them are his good friends, and he expressed his concern over the tensions in Kashmir. Also, in recent developments, 7-year-old Mohammad Saddam, who was a small boy in the Azad Kashmir side of across the border from India, he was shot by an Indian soldier sniper. He was just standing outside his house. He's an innocent child. There can be nobody more innocent than a 7-year-old little boy. He's not a terrorist or any such thing. And an Indian army sniper aimed at him and shot him outside his house. And now that child has succumbed to his injuries, unfortunately, and he has passed away. How long will the world stand around and watch this happen and not raise their voice against these atrocities taking place against innocent civilians? There can be nothing more innocent than a child. This is not only happening across the line of control in Azad Kashmir with civilians, it's happening all over the occupied valley in Indian occupied Kashmir ever since the revocation of its special status in India in its constitution. There have been riots there and stone pelting, and we have seen videos of those rioters being shot at, and many people have been killed and detained. And this is now the 15th day of curfew. We don't know when that's going to end. The situation there is very dire at the moment. Also, Pakistan has expressed its alarm at the Indian attitude over the Indus water treaty. There are certain measures that India is supposed to follow and certain protocols that are supposed to be followed, and we are supposed to be warned about activity that could result in flooding in Pakistan, which India has not been honoring. So we are going to speak about that as well in our programs. And as also, another development is that Twitter had suspended about in excess of 200 accounts of people who were tweeting against atrocities in Indian occupied Kashmir. And purely for that reason, those accounts had been suspended. And according to DGISPR's tweet, he said that the reason those accounts were suspended, even though they were following the policy of Twitter of responsible use, etc., the reason that those accounts were suspended is because there are employees in Twitter who are Indian origin, and they are the people who are having these accounts suspended. So what is the legality of them doing this? Are employees allowed to at will in such big reputable companies? Are they allowed at will to suspend any account they wish? And how does that affect the neutrality of these multinational companies, and what can Pakistan do about that further? So we'll be talking about these very important issues, and we'll also be having a look at the stock market at the end of our program. Let's welcome the guests in our studio today who are going to be discussing this with us. We have with us Air Vice Marshal Ikramullah Bhatti, who's a renowned senior analyst, and we also have with us Mr. Raja Kesar, who's an international affairs expert. Thank you so much to both of you for being with us today on our program again. Sir, I'd like to begin by asking you that what can we gather from President Trump's statement about how the US is viewing the situation in Kashmir?
Well, you see, it all started on 22nd of July when he mentioned while meeting with our Prime Minister that he has been requested by the Indian Prime Minister to mediate on the issue of Kashmir.
Right.
Provided both the sides request and they agree, only then he'll go ahead with it. And we found soon after that the Indians had refused or denied the statement by the president, and then later we heard from a representative of White House that the Indian president, the American president does not make things up.
Yes.
But the fact is that, of course, there was no denial from the Indian Prime Minister himself.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it followed the unilateral abrogation of Article 370 and 35A by the Indian government between 3rd and 5th August. And after that, of course, tension mounted between the two countries, and America being the sole superpower, and the American president already mentioned that he has been approached. So the responsibility of maintaining peace, tranquility, and order in this region, especially between these two nuclear-armed countries, fell squarely on the shoulders of the American president. Mm-hmm. And while we know that Prime Minister Imran Khan had a telephone conversation with the American president, a conversation also took place between the Indian Prime Minister and the American president. And now that we have a statement from the White House acknowledging these two conversations and their own version, which actually indicates that the Americans view this with serious concern, and they are prepared to play their role. But the fact is that they would be only able to play their role, firstly, when both the parties are willing, and secondly, if on their own they feel that the situation between the two countries or in the region has become so serious that even if they do not have a request from both the parties, they would like to intervene for the greater interest
So
of the
has the
world.
situation become that serious?
Well, not for now, but I guess it's heading in that direction because of the mounting atrocities over the Kashmiris and the increasing belligerence that the Indian government is showing towards Pakistan. And now they're talking of the Pakistani side of Kashmir, that in case there is to be a negotiation between India and Pakistan, we will talk about the, so to say, according to them, the Pakistani held Kashmir, and they're not willing to talk about the Indian held Kashmir. Whereas the UN resolutions, the so-called instrument of annexation, which has been repeatedly questioned by Pakistan and even by the family of the Raja of Kashmir at that time, that it was under duress. Nonetheless, now with the abrogation of these two articles, we've gone back to a situation of 1947, where the field is open both for India and Pakistan, and which clearly creates a possibility of an armed conflict between the two countries.
Yeah.
So that is where I think the American concern does show up, and at the moment they're limiting themselves to looking forward to an application or a request by both the sides to for the Americans to mediate. But I think if the Indians continue to head in that direction, there is a possibility that the Americans would realize that any further delay is going to create a situation which may be irreversible. So they may even intervene on their own.
Right. Okay.
But we'll have to wait and see that if are the Indians willing to head in that direction. Because
Right.
if you look at the incident, the events of 26th and 27th February, it's now very clear that there was American intervention, and only that is why both India and Pakistan held back and did not go to the next level of war.
Absolutely. So, Raja Kesan, I'd like to ask you that is it possible that by speaking to both leaders, President Trump has already started that mediation process that he had expressed to Prime Minister Imran Khan that he wanted to do? He wanted to mediate on Kashmir, and he had said that Prime Minister Modi had requested him to do so. Naturally, like Air Vice Marshal Sabit said, that after that meeting, a lot happened, you know, with the Indian government going back, revoking Article 370 and 35A. However, now President Trump has spoken to both the leaders. So do you think this is the mediation process that he was speaking about?
No, well, Sharmeen, thank you in the first place. Well, I'd slightly take it differently. It is classical American style, you know, which always aims at favoring India, because every time when any such kind of crisis situation develops where India is at the wrong side, Americans always they jump into stabilize the crisis, but by favoring, you know, both of the parties on equal parity. This was the time where India needed a snub, you know, where Trump would have, you know, taken some unequivocal position by having termed that revocal as something which was illegitimate and something which can have a very catastrophic impinging on the regional scenario, because you see the kind of warmongering which India is going ahead with, and if you see that the statement of Rajat Sethi in which he says that we are rethinking over our own nuclear posture, it in itself speaks volume of the madness which is there in India right now, and the kind of you know, bellicosity and the kind of belligerence which with which India is currently operating. This was the time where America should have played a role of not a balancer between both the parties. This was a time where, you know, India was likely to be told and to be conveyed that you are probably going above the board. So and this is again Trump's style of saying both the parties, well, you both people are fantastic and both people prime ministers are my friend. So this at the end of the day it ends up like a cul-de-sac which ends up benefiting nothing. You just try to stabilize the situation and you try to act as a balancer in the given quagmire, but at the end of the day all the predicaments they remain on their own and they remain the same.
Right.
So I don't subscribe to this argument that Trump has started mediation. Mediation it's a legal terminology and within the international relations. It aims or it actually underscores realizing the stringency and the monstrosity of the dispute first. But we haven't seen any explicit denouncement from American side about this illegal and grossly unconstitutional step which India has made on August 5th and 6th, 2019. So when Trump has not actually denounced India's actions, it means that you are covertly legitimizing their role within the region. And you see that Americans, they have invested in India for past one decade as a counterweight to China.
He did say in his tweet that he had Prime Minister Imran Khan and Prime Minister Modi, the discussion he had with them was regarding trade and strategic partnerships.
Well,
I
think the kind of the crisis situation at this point of time necessitates something more than this oratory. India is it is projecting itself as a daunting threat to the peace within the region. And the kind of statements which are coming from the other side of the border and the kind of rhetoric which this Amit Shah, Modi and Doval, this troika is coming up with something which is very catastrophic for the region. It is boarding something which is not very not very nice, and it is not something which is good for the region. I mean, this is the point of time where Americans, they have held up India as their front state ally, as their counterweight to China, and they their pivot to Asia policy and all of those things. For all obvious reasons, they had been siding by India. But at this point of time, it is a nuclear flashpoint. Under the nuclear umbrella, any kind of misfortune, any kind of misadventure can end up with something which is horrendous. The situation demanded India to be snubbed. India to be asked very in a very rather non-diplomatic language of not escalating the situation.
Right.
And when you see that India is making a shift from its nuclear doctrine, from its nuclear policy, so Americans who had always considered themselves as the responsible for the global peace and as the global hegemon, and I think this role also necessitates that they should intervene into this thing, and if they are up for mediation, then at the first place they need to say spade a spade to India that it is going something above the board.
Right. So Air Vice Marshal Ikramullah, I'd like to ask you, sir, that now do you think that the US is concerned about the Pakistan and India tensions due to the ongoing peace process in Afghanistan? Do you think maybe that they feel that will be compromised with this tension in Kashmir, and because they have a lot at stake, 14,000 troops have to be withdrawn and there's a very short amount of time left, they're close to a peace agreement. So do you feel that maybe that is a point of concern for the US?
Well, there are a couple of angles to it. Firstly, if we expect the Americans to behave in a just, moral, legal manner, I think we'll be wrong.
Okay.
Because the Americans are just pursuing their interests like any other nation, and keeping India pleased, happy and comfortable is their interest. While we may expect from them that they should be act like an honest broker and play fair, play neutral, go by the book, go by the moral values, by legal situation, the constitutional situation, and and accordingly, intervene and decide.
Right.
But of course, they are pursuing their own interests, and they will not, disturb India in any manner. Now, when we look at Pakistan, we also have a leverage because of the Afghan situation. They are very close to a peace settlement with the Taliban. Pakistan continues to have a relationship with Taliban. Pakistan has a leverage, and with that, Pakistan is in a position to lean against America that they ought to intervene and respect the UN resolutions, and being the sole superpower.
Can't the US see that India is trying to destabilize that peace process? What is the reason that it would try and do that? And it goes against American interests, because that's one of their priorities at the moment.
Well, certainly that is where that's a cliffhanger or the stumbling block that the Americans would like, that Pakistan should not be put in a corner or disturbed in a manner that it is unable to, for whatever reason, to fully cooperate or support or participate in the peace process and live up to the commitment that it had made during the visit of the Prime Minister. And whereas Pakistan is well in a position to say that because of this increasing tension on our eastern border, our focus, our attention, our resources are going to be diverted, and hence we can no longer stand by that commitment that we made. We will not be in a position to do that.
We're not in a position to, exactly.
Unfortunately. And I think Pakistan must have conveyed that in as many words to the Americans, that for these reasons they ought to intervene and ensure that there is no destabilization on our eastern border, and that we can peacefully, wholeheartedly concentrate and go ahead and execute the commitment that we made with the Americans during that visit.
Right.
So I think that alone should bear its weight on the American decision making or view on, towards the situation in Indo-Pak border and vis-a-vis Kashmir. And I think sooner or later they'll have to shift their weight in a manner that Pakistan is made comfortable to an extent that it can continue to support them in their reaching agreement and having a comfortable, respectable withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Right.
So I think there is still hope, and while we may be looking at the Americans to behave in a very idealistic manner, which of course no nation does. Everybody pursued its own interest. I mean, we can look at our several other friends on whom we had many expectations, and if they have not supported us, how and why are we looking at the Americans to do that?
Right. So, Rajat, I would like to ask you this: that does the U.S. understand the full threat that's here? Of course, they do naturally understand the whole threat of the nuclear exchange between the two countries. But how does a nuclear exchange? We know it would be devastating for India and Pakistan. How does it affect the rest of the world?
You know what? There is entire norm structure. This entire non-proliferation treaty and this nuclear non-proliferation, which has been upheld as a kind of, just caution by the international community that we won't allow any country to pursue this, and the kind of this obliteration which countries they might face in the aftermath of any nuclear test. So, international community, it is always up for these kind of campaigns like Global Zero and reducing the threats of the use of the nuclear weapons. Yeah. So, and then
because obviously the fallout, if it affects the region, it affects the world, your whole atmosphere, everything.
And it nearly constitutes almost 1/3 of the population of the world. I mean, it's 1.5 billion people living on this.
But then again, sir, I mean, I don't know if you'd like to add, why should they be concerned about the 1/3 of the population here? How will it affect them? Yes.
You see, if there is a full spectrum nuclear exchange between the two countries, I mean, there are reports which clearly indicate that for next 3 years, the world is going to lose around 40 to 50% of its crops.
Okay.
People are going to start dying of hunger, and at least 90% of the total population of the world is going to be affected, which includes America and all other big countries.
Okay. So that's a huge
Yeah,
concern.
and at the same time, I think under Trump, United States is primarily concerned about its own interest, and Trump has actually meant America first. What was his slogan? He's not caring about the rest of the world. He is keeping America first at every point of time. So in this precarious situation and something a scenario which is very whimsical, I think having this kind of nationalistic and parochial Hindu nationalist government in New Delhi, it is nothing less than a disaster which is rattling at the doors of the South Asian peace.
Right, right.
And it is a high time where international community and the Committee of the Nations, they should also realize the fact that it is actually India which is cultivating a kind of fear and insecurity. And you see that India, it always has maintained a point that its nuclear program is not directed towards Pakistan but towards China, because they face existential threat from China. That is why they said that our nuclear posture, they always remained adamant that it is no first use. But when they are saying that we are thinking to revise our nuclear posture and we are going to go for the option of the first use of the nuclear weapon, it means that now it has become Pakistan-centric nuclear
is targeted at
program.
Pakistan
It
as
is
well,
targeting
right.
Pakistan.
And
So,
in India and US also have their trade issues that have happened recently and all as well. So I mean, it's not that they're
but these hiccups do not actually hinder, or they don't stand as an impediment towards that longer design of the United States towards this region.
right.
Still, these kind of just mere political gimmicks like Trump saying to Modi that he ridiculed him over building a library in Afghanistan and all these kind of things. They are not substantive developments which we say that US-India partnership, it does not exist anymore. It still exists,
still
and
there.
it still exists with a very robust mandate,
It's
and
still very
it
strong.
is quite in a vigor. But at the same time, I think this is that high time for us to reflect onto our own
And it
options
would
as
be,
well.
it's highly surprising that the US administration would be comfortable working with an administration that follows a Nazi ideology. I mean, the whole world is averse to that kind of ideology.
And you
So
see,
that is kind of
American
surprising.
dream, or the American, the state, it was based upon the principles of individualism, democracy, liberty. All of these things. India at this point of time is totally at odds with, at poles apart from all of these secular and liberal ideals. It is a Hindu majoritarian government which is into a mob lynching. It is making the life of minorities worst within the political and social landscape, and the kind of siege which India has inflicted upon the people of Kashmir for past 2 weeks, it is again unprecedented, and
Yeah.
it is an irony of the modern times.
Right.
So I think this is the time where Pakistan should play its role in highlighting and branding this severe and brutal human rights violations to the rest of the world, and to tell that you have always championed this cause of the human
Yeah.
rights. Now this is the litmus case for you to actually substantiate what you have been saying.
Right, absolutely. So, sir, Air Vice Marshal Ikramullah, I would like to ask you now, the Minister for Water and Power, Faisal Wavda, has said that he's complained that India has failed to deliver on the 1960 Indus Water Treaty information about extraordinary floods. So, what kind of information is India required to provide to Pakistan regarding the water treaty and the rivers and their flooding and etc.?
You see, as per the Indus Water Treaty signed in 1960 between Jalna Ayub and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru of India, the three eastern rivers, Sutlej, Beas and Ravi, were given to India, and Chenab, Jhelum and Indus were with Pakistan. And it was agreed that a certain amount of water of the eastern river will be used by the Indians, and excess water will continue to flow. And in any case, during rainy or flooding season, the extra water will be allowed to go through rivers. But the fact remains that for the whole year there has been no water, people will start to move in the dry river beds. There will be even cultivation, there will be animal grazing, or there will be even temporary housing created in that land. And if the water is let to flow in that river without notice, there will be a sudden flood, and people will have no early warning, and there will be loss of life and property. And there was a system provided, a mechanism provided within the treaty where, because the water was flowing from India to Pakistan, the Indian concerned officials were to notify Pakistan, the Pakistani officials, that the timing and the volume of water that were expected to be released at whatever time, and the notice was to be sufficient for the people to be warned and they to clear the riverbed. But unfortunately, we know in case of river Satluj, which has in which the Indians have released water, it happened without any warning or notification. Hence, people were caught by surprise, and there were incidents of loss of property, and even people's life got endangered. So, which is of course absolutely a violation of the treaty. And while we can look at into the in the backdrop of the current tension, but the fact remains that despite tensions, despite whatever conflict situation that we have, that the treaty exists and it is in practice, and it must be adhered to. And if its violation does create serious repercussions in the neighboring country, it must be taken note of, and
Absolutely.
the concerned officials should be pointed out. And because it was the World Bank which brokered this treaty, the responsibility lies squarely on the World Bank, and I think Pakistan must bring it to the notice of the World Bank and lodge a formal complaint that this thing has happened.
Okay, so
And this is not the first time; it has happened earlier also.
Sharmeen,
Right, please.
Before you put a question, let me add something to the earlier conversation. Let me use this program as an opportunity to make a prediction that after this scrapping down of Article 370, this Indus Water Treaty is going to be the next thing which Modi will come up with.
And that's going to have far more serious consequences.
Yeah, and that because at the same time, you see, because we are the lower riparian states, so they are not going to be profoundly impacted by the treaty, except for those legal repercussions which they might have to face. And that at this point of time, the kind of that jingoism which Modi and this India is living up with, they are not caring about the norms and the niceties of the international law and international community. And let me tell you that if you talk to Indians, or if you happen to dissect their mindset, they believe that international law is for the lesser nations, and they consider themselves as into the committee of the major nations, and they believe that they can actually easily escape from any of those international laws repercussions. And you see, this has happened to in Kulbhushan Jadhav's verdict as well, and this has recently happened when India illegally revoked this Article 370. So Pakistan should be prepared from now onwards, and they should make a dossier. They should appoint one official who should be in consultative touch with the World Bank and all the relevant organizations, because this is going to be next strike which Modi would make, because he had given this inkling while making a speech when he was doing the electoral campaign in Uttar Pradesh back in 2017.
Okay.
So
he's threatened this, which means usually what he threatens, he does.
Yes, and he because he out for nothing, but he has built a reputation in India that what Modi says he does. So with this kind of bellicosity, and with this kind of someone who is very hard-headed and who actually does not care much about the repercussions which are and the obstacles and the obstructions coming the way. So I think this is the high time for Pakistan to negotiate its diplomatic capital and to exert it properly, so that one thing is for sure, that we were taken by surprise when this development of Article 370 took place,
so this
because we were not
be
expecting.
Taken for surprise again.
Yes, because when we need to admit it that we were left befuddled, because we were not expecting this coming so early. He kept that as a mystery for 3 days, and everyone was whispering what is going to happen in Kashmir. Something is cooking up, and then suddenly we came up with this development, and we had to face that India has revoked the special status of
Right.
Kashmir.
So
This might happen.
this could happen. That's a very big threat, because then it's an issue between Pakistan and India, which there could potentially be a war. Because at the moment, Kashmir is still not, Pakistan is helping them morally and diplomatically, but now and politically. But now this would be something far more serious for Pakistan.
And if you see, Sharmeen, because I have been appearing onto Indian media outlets for last 2 weeks onto certain TV channels and into the certain TV programs, and what I could make out of the pulse of the Indian media, that they are doing a lot of programs and shows on what they term as Pakistan occupied Kashmir, POK, what they call it. But it means that we are going to take POK back. So this kind of, because at this point of time India's corporatist media is being fed by the BJP. Many of their sitting MLAs, they are the investors of the TV channels there in India. So what Indian media is spewing should not be taken very lightly. They do overhype the situations, and then they do actually create the hawks, but at the same time they do a certain kind of nuanced agenda setting as well. So if they are saying this, then that should not be falling onto the deaf ears only, but rather we should be taking it very seriously, and we should be taking some preventive measures as well, and some remedial measures, that if India went ahead with this kind of surprising move again, what will be our next course of action?
Right.
Because you see, what I could make out of Modi's mindset in the recent aftermath of Article 370, that there would be hue and cry for certain a few weeks, and things would return to normalcy.
And they'll just get away with it, like a lot of countries have gotten away with it. Let's just now speak about the accounts on Twitter, on social media, that have been suspended. There are a lot of Pakistanis who've been vocal about Kashmir and what's happened there, and suddenly you find that their accounts are being suspended by that social media site. Let's see a package about that, and then we'll further discuss it.
Pakistani Twitter users face a threat against their freedom of speech as Twitter suspends around 200 Pakistani accounts over seemingly baseless claims. More noticeably, government officials, journalists, and activists tweeting against the atrocities in Kashmir are facing these suspensions. Twitter compliance with requests made by the Indian government seems to be improving rapidly. As a result, the Indian government is likely using Twitter as a talking head to push its narrative forward and engaging in fifth-generation warfare. Fifth-generation warfare employs non-state warriors to push state agenda and is usually motivated by nothing more than frustration. By forcing one side of the argument to remain silent, Twitter has become a tool for the Indian government to propagate their narrative. DGISPR Major General Asif Ghafoor tweeted, Pakistan authorities have taken up the case with Twitter and Facebook against suspending Pakistani accounts for posting in support of Kashmir. Twitter denied any bias towards Pakistanis. However, they are yet to give a reason behind the suspensions.
So now we have online with us Rija Kamran, who's going to speak to us about this. Thank you for joining our program.
Thank you, Sharmeen.
Can you just tell us a little bit about these 200 plus accounts that have been suspended on Twitter, and Pakistan's reaction, where the Pakistan Telecommunication Authority has lodged a complaint with the social media sites Twitter and Facebook? How unethical is that of the employees to be able to do that? They're employed by these large multinational companies, and they're actually sitting there at will, suspending any accounts that they wish. Is that how the situation is?
Yes, Sharmeen, so this is definitely a very problematic stance that these companies are portraying, because essentially what you are saying is that it's okay to promote one narrative while silencing the other narrative. So what's happening and what we are seeing here in terms of Pakistani accounts being suspended, these accounts are not just belonging to general audience in Pakistan, but also to journalists and even activists and government officials as well. So, and like ISPR spokesperson has also said that in his tweet that Indian staff, Twitter's Indian staff is responsible behind this, and India's reasoning is that these accounts were essentially promoting fake news or false information regarding Kashmir. So I think this is very problematic, and it's definitely unethical. And while Twitter and all the other social media platforms need to be very politically unbiased, we repeatedly see that they lack transparency, especially in terms of Twitter, because Twitter has constantly been lacking, transparency around their content moderation and how they take down content. And even when you take this up to Twitter, there is no satisfactory response from them as well.
Do these employees, do they have a legal right to take an action like that within a company?
See, so because Twitter doesn't say, their policies don't say that their stance towards anything is biased. It's biased because these policies are essentially written in a very careful manner that do not suggest that Twitter's narrative is biased or favors one narrative. But in terms of whether the employees have the right to do it or not, the employees essentially are doing their own job, and the pressure is coming from elsewhere. And in this case, as Indian officials have also, accepted that they have put pressure on Twitter management to suspend these accounts from Pakistan. So I think when any company, any social media company is localized, they are running or operating under the laws of the country, and they are liable to agree to the policies or agree to the pressure that is being put by the government as well.
Right. So, what recourse does Pakistan have in a situation like this? If this is taking place, is there a place to lodge a formal complaint other than the companies themselves?
So in terms of Pakistan, I don't think that there is any specific complaints. For example, if you see what's happening here as well, like 2 days ago, the report came that the Pakistani authorities have taken the issue with Twitter and Facebook about suspended accounts. I think the best recourse that Pakistani users have is to take their complaints to Twitter at this point at least.
So, the users should take the complaint to Twitter. Okay.
Yes.
Right. So this is using social media in a situation like this. How what do you feel is the impact of this in this very, very precarious situation, a very tense situation between two countries? So you have social media where a lot of people are active. How do you think? What do you think is the weight of social media right now in this situation?
So all the discussions that happen in these days, they happen first on social media, and then they are being carried on different platforms. So I think the importance of social media in these scenarios is very important, and it's very prominent as well. As you see that governments around the world are focusing more on digital media as along with mainstream media as well, because they understand that social media holds a lot of weightage in these discussions and building the narratives and also flow of information. This is also why you see increased internet shutdowns as well, and what you are seeing in Kashmir as well since August 5th. It is the communication blackout in the region. It's 179th in this year only. So I think the weightage of social media and internet at large is very strong and very large, and everybody is agreeing to it, and that's why you see a lot of crackdown on social media websites and internet in general, and also the narratives that build on these platforms.
Right, and you're also seeing a lot of Indian activists and Indian leaders who were very active on social media and Twitter, who are speaking up against the problem in Kashmir right now. You're seeing them being detained because, do you think that's because of the impact their statements on social media were having on public opinion?
Yes, so the narrative that we're seeing from prominent Indian personalities from on social media as well, they definitely make public opinion. For example, Twitter has a very huge user base in India because of their population size as well. Their population is way larger. Their user base is way larger than in Pakistan. So information flow of information and opinion building on social media happens on different levels than in Pakistan as well. So what they are posting online has a lot of importance in India and elsewhere as well, because they are coming from they are being followed by a lot of people as well.
Right. Thank you so much, Rija Kamran, for giving us your views on this topic. Air Vice Marshal Ikramullah, would you like to comment on this, that blocking the Twitter sites and accounts of people who are tweeting against Indian atrocities in Kashmir, which the world has a right to speak up about what's going on right in their neighborhood, and everybody has a right to speak their opinion equally on social media sites. So what is your opinion about what has happened on Twitter, how unethical it is for employees to just go and start suspending accounts in such reputable companies?
Well, the employees happen to be in a position to do that, and this action is clearly indicative of the loyalties where they belong, because I'm sure the intelligence agencies of India must be having contact with all those employees, and they must be working under the direction of the intelligence agency as to how they should go about it. And as it was mentioned in the comments by our IT expert, that primarily it is the users or the clients who are supposed to or required to complain to the company, and if not, eventually it can go in a court if the company does not address their grievance, that why has the account been closed. But there is a recourse available, and I'm sure all the affected Twitter account holders must have initiated their own complaints, and I guess the management of Twitter ought to entertain, otherwise they're going to lose credibility within this market.
Absolutely. So Raja Kaisar, what, in your opinion, do you think that the fact that India is having accounts suspended on Twitter, is it because Pakistan is winning the information war? We're putting out so much information out there about the Indian RSS mindset of the government at the moment. I'm not saying all Indians are the same. It's the mindset of the current Modi government that is like that. And we have been furthering that narrative, and we've been displaying the plight of the Kashmiri people. Is India threatened about how Pakistan has been so strong in the information war?
Well, this is symptomatic of two things primarily. One, that the inroads of India into this technology, into Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, these enterprises, the way they have been overarchingly taken over by Indians, their IT experts. You see, in the aftermath of Pulwama, Pakistan's Foreign Office spokesperson Dr. Mohammad Faisal's account was even suspended, and it remained suspended for 19 hours. So it in itself is indicative of a fact that Indians, they have very deep inroads into these technologies and these technological enterprises. One thing. And second thing, again, yes, I would have to agree with you that it is indicative of a fact that Pakistan's success in this hybrid warfare, the way Pakistan has managed to expose India's brutal face to the rest of the world, and the way Pakistan have been able to actually expose the fifth column within Pakistan, the people and the community which was speaking of their own interest and was voicing the national interest of other countries while being in Pakistan. So all of these things, they cumulatively have put India under pressure, and you see that it was reflected into their discussions and conversations after the Pulwama and this entire fallout. Indian media, it was of the opinion that India also needs to have a directorate of these public relations like Pakistan's ISPR, because the way Major General Asif Ghafoor, who heads actually this ISPR, the way he demonstrated his credentials, exposing India and coming very calm.
Yeah, he's done a stellar job. Unfortunately, we've run out of time for the program. Thank you so much, Raja Kaisar and Air Vice Marshal Ikramullah. Thank you for joining us today. Viewers, that's all the time we have for today's program. So we hope you enjoyed our program and followed what we're speaking about these days. It's mostly about the very precarious situation in Indian occupied Kashmir, and we're trying to bring as much information to you about that and the analysis about that. So that's all for today from our team at World Today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.